be here, and I want to thank everybody for giving up some of their valuable time to sit in. I think you will find it to be very, very interesting. I want to start by putting this more in a clinical context. Usually when I present on this subject, we're talking about performing under pressure as a high performance skill, you know, if you have to give a presentation or audition. And we'll talk a little about that, but I want to start by telling you a clinical incident that really got me interested in the subject. I'll take you all the way back to 1976 when I was doing my clinical internship, part of it at the Brentwood VA Hospital in Los Angeles, working on a ward that was exclusively designed for Vietnam veterans, first in the country. And one of my clients, as I would like to call them, was ready to leave the hospital, and he had to call his mother, who was in Brooklyn, New York, to tell her that he was being discharged. And I said, okay, we're going to make the phone call now. And I told him that he had 2 minutes to tell his mother what you would think would be very good news. Now, actually, giving him 2 minutes to do this was actually a mistake. I didn't know it at the time, but as I will soon explain, it was. Anyway, he calls up his mother, and he says, I'm getting discharged from the hospital. This is before there were speakerphones. And literally, I could hear her bombarding him with statements such as, they're letting you out of the hospital? Are they incompetent? You're too sick, and so on. In front of my very eyes, we'll call him Lewis, he started to choke. He couldn't talk. He started to sweat. His hands were trembling, and I literally had to take the phone away. Now, when I think about it, that was probably the first situation that made me think about why can some people perform under pressure and others not. And then in 1994, I moved from Los Angeles back to the East Coast to Connecticut, where I am speaking from now. And being a big baseball fan, I would watch Yankee games every single night. And if I was not a, quote, expert in anger management, I probably would have broken my TV set because I saw my team always choking in the 9th inning, blowing leads. And there it was again. How come some people can do well and others can't? Now, this led me into a lot of a journey of studying. But instead of studying the idea of peak performance skills, I started to study the concept of pressure and how it impacts us. And let me just ask you a quick question. How do you perform under pressure? Would you say the same as usual, worse than usual, or better than usual? Now, if you say the same as usual, you're actually in the minority of the population. Very few people actually perform to their usual capability. In other words, most people perform below their capability. And if you think that you perform better than usual, I would say you're in the delusional category. One of my favorite movies was with Robert Redford. It was called The Natural. Most sports fans have seen it, where the baseball player comes up in the bottom of the 9th inning, very timely now since the Dodgers are in the playoffs, and he hits the game-winning home run. Now, every sports fan has seen that scenario hundreds of times. The reality, though, is in the book, the same, written by Bernard Bauman, the player struck out. That is reality. One of the things I learned about studying the subject of pressure is if I had to personify it, I would tell you that it is a villain in your life. Nobody does better under pressure. When I was growing up, I used to think the edge was rising to the occasion. You know, it's a big test tomorrow. You have to rise to the occasion. Or you're giving a presentation. You're rising to the occasion. The reality is the edge is not rising to the occasion because nobody does, not even Michael Jordan, not even LeBron. Elite athletes do not perform better in pressure situations. The key is they don't perform worse. In other words, the C student is never going to get 1,600 on their SATs unless they cheat. But many times, the A student will do worse. So what I have found is the essence of pressure management is, again, not to help people do better, because you can't do better than your best. And even if you do your best, you must remember it might not be good enough. Again, being a baseball fan, I watched the Dodger-Cub game last night, and that was a great game. The Cubs didn't play poorly. They played very well. The Dodgers just played better. Sometimes a student can ace their SATs, but you know what? They're still not getting into Harvard. That is a big difference than the student or the baseball player who, in their moment of truth, doesn't perform to his or her capabilities. So really, when we speak about pressure management, the goal is that the concepts, the pressure solutions, which I'm going to share with you, help people perform to their capability. That is the best you can do. Anytime you perform below your capability, you are doing a disservice to yourself. Remember, as I said, pressure is a villain. It downgrades your cognitive skills. It disturbs your thinking. It distresses your body. It disrupts your action. Your cognitive success tools, and think of this again in terms of your clients, memory, attention, judgment, decision-making, are all attacked in a pressure moment. They are all lowered. Your body, you get a sense, some people say that they get butterflies, they get a feeling of jitterness because your physical arousal is being affected by the psychological experience of pressure. And in terms of your actions, it makes you impulsive. Think of your human performance system as, if you're taking notes, draw a triangle. And that's what your human performance system looks like. It has three components: your thoughts, your physiology, and your behavior. And what pressure does is it disturbs all three of those components. For example, one of the ways that pressure disturbs your thinking is it creates what I like to call pressure distortions. All of you have heard the concept of cognitive distortions. Two of them actually create pressure. That's why I call pressure distortions. One is what I call chance of a lifetime. It would be when you're in a situation and you start telling yourself, I'm never going to get this chance again. Literally, that will intensify your feelings of pressure and cause you to do worse. Another is magnification. This is the most important interview I've ever had in my life. This is the most important test. When I think of all the important tests that I have had, there must have been literally hundreds and hundreds of them. And understand something. The more important you make something, the more pressure you feel. This is what happens with a lot of clients. And, you know, as you saw in the description, the abstract of the webinar, think of all your different client populations, those that have substance abuse problems, those that have eating disorders, anxiety disorders. Clinical research shows that these people have a difficulty in handling the pressure of a situation. And for many, their prime coping mechanism, instead of dealing with the situation, they fall back into their maladaptive coping mechanisms, which might be having a drink, smoking a joint, eating something. So I have found, one of the other books I wrote was on anger management, and I used to tell people, unless you read the clinical research, you will not believe that mismanaged anger is basically a factor in every disorder that you can mention. It's hard to find a psychological disorder in which the person can manage anger. And I am saying the same thing about pressure. Many people confuse stress and pressure, and I want to take a second to differentiate the two. Pressure, you experience pressure when you're in a situation that is important to you, and the outcome is dependent on your performance, like a test. A test for most students is very important, and the outcome is dependent on their performance. In those situations, the overwhelming majority of the population performs below their capabilities. How many times have you been watching a sporting event, a basketball game, and the guy's missing foul shots in all the pressure situations, and then at the end of the game he starts making them, and everybody says, why couldn't he do this 2 minutes ago? The answer is because there was more pressure. This is why when you don't care about something, you absolutely feel no pressure. If you have to take a test and you've already got an A in the course, the outcome really doesn't matter on that last test. That's why you experience no pressure. One of the things that you have to help your patients and clients with is to keep things in perspective so that they do not over-exaggerate the significance of the situation. So that's what pressure is, a situation in which you have to produce a result, and the outcome of that result, the cause of it, is dependent on your performance. Stress is very different. There are hundreds of definitions of stress. It's not a question of the right definition and the wrong definition. I have found the most frequent one is to think of stress when you're in a situation and the demands of the situation outweigh your resources to respond. So on a Saturday, you might have to pick a friend up at the airport, get a haircut, go shopping, take your kids somewhere. That becomes a stressful day. You have a lot of demands made upon you, and you don't necessarily have the resources to respond. If you have too many bills and not enough cash, you will experience financial distress. In the course of a stressful day, you have a lot of things you could do. You could delegate, you could prioritize, you could blow some things off. In a pressure situation, you can't do that. You have to stay relaxed in a pressure situation, but you still have to land the plane on the Hudson. The quarterback still needs to stay relaxed, but he still has to throw the touchdown pass. So another difference between stress and pressure is that in a pressure situation, there is only one response, and it has to be an effective response. So this is how pressure attacks you. It disturbs your thinking, it distresses your body, and it disrupts your action. And when I started studying the subject, I found a whole bunch of interventions that can help people in a pressure moment. And we're going to talk about reducing daily feelings of pressure as well by doing these things. First, pressure science, pressure solutions, they reduce the feelings of anxiety, fear, stress, and embarrassment. Now understand why there is anxiety in a pressure moment. Because there is uncertainty. Remember what a pressure situation is. A situation in which you have something on the line and the outcome is dependent on your performance. If you were watching a baseball game tonight, if you're a Dodger fan, the Dodgers are winning by 10 runs going into the 9th inning, you'll probably turn the station. There is no tension. There's no anxiety because the outcome is already certain. On the other hand, if it's nothing, that's when you're sitting on the edge of your seat because the outcome is uncertain. So part of helping a person deal with the feeling of pressure is to be able to help them reduce their anxiety. As we'll see, if you are taking a test and you're anxious about it, or one of your clients is anxious about a job interview, one of the ways that you can help him or her reduce that anxiety is simply by practice, practice, practice. I heard a great statement the other night. I forgot who said it, but it was the idea that for a pressure moment, you keep practicing until you can't do it perfectly. You keep doing it over and over and over. That's just one way. And notice that I have stress in there. Stress is part of every pressure situation. Remember what stress is: a demand to do something. If you are married to stress, your partner is saying, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, and after you've done everything, they're going to tell you to do more. If you are married to pressure, they're going to say, do this, do this, do this, do this, and they're going to add on, you better not fail. So the demand in a pressure situation is that you have to produce an effective response. So what pressure management does is it helps the individual or yourself reduce these feelings. We know that all of these feelings, anxiety, fear, stress, and the fear of embarrassment, all work against you. Nobody ever comes home and says, gee, I wish I was embarrassed more. I wish I had more anxiety. I wish I had more fear. I wish I had more stress. So now that you can start to see individuals that have anxiety disorders, they are behind the 8 ball already in a pressure moment. Pressure already has inherent anxiety because of the uncertain outcome. But when you're bringing more anxiety to the table in that situation, it only makes the situation worse. It is not a coincidence that athletes who have high somatic anxiety, they're anxious about their body, do worse in pressure moments. It's very hard if you're a football player and you're anxious about your body to dive, which is required to make that spectacular catch. This is why that there are some government jobs that screen people for anxiety disorders. If you are working for the Federal Aviation Association and having to tell pilots how to land during a storm, it's really not a good idea for that federal person to have an anxiety disorder, because it's going to cloud his thinking or her thinking and judgment. Second thing that pressure management does is that it helps you avoid distracting thoughts. Think of what you're thinking many times in a pressure situation. Think of what times, if you're a therapist and just starting out, when I was in graduate school, you know, we would be observed through the mirror by a supervising therapist. So now I can remember times when, instead of thinking and staying focused on helping my client, I would start to think, am I doing this right? What are they thinking behind the window? Are they laughing at me? And as soon as you get thoughts like that, you are distracted from the task at hand. So we have to have some ways that you can teach people how to stay focused. The next thing that pressure management does is it helps you keep your cool, stay calm, and collected. Cool, calm, and collected. You know, now we call this affect regulation, managing that physical arousal. And many people think that it's just a question of being relaxed in a pressure moment. Not really. In some pressure moments that you want to have heightened physical arousal, such as enthusiasm. So as a quick note, if you're going into a situation and you need to be enthusiastic and you find that you're not, what can you do in 30 seconds that will make you enthusiastic? How do you make your depressed clients enthusiastic? How do you make somebody who has come in because they've had a major setback and are really soured on life, how can you turn that around in a very short period of time? Enthusiastic technologies help you do that. And finally, what pressure management does is it helps you direct your behavior so you can do your best. Now remember again, is that your best might not be good enough. but you have no chance of success if you don't do your best. What I found, and I got to talk to many elite athletes in doing research for my book, is that the common denominator of all the great players is that they are always doing 100% max performance every single day, every single game. See, that's what's hard to do. It's hard to do your best every day. But those that do have a edge. Some of the pressure myths that I've learned is, one, as I said right off the bat, nobody does better under pressure. Nobody rises to the occasion. And the reason that is so important, especially with clinical populations, is that when you get into a situation and you think that you have to do better than your best to prove yourself, you actually end up doing worse. So you see this a lot. A lot of times a person gets a promotion and they say, okay, now I have to prove myself. Wrong, you've already proved yourself. That's why you got the promotion. Athletes would call that pressing. The guy gets a $20 million contract, so now he has to say, I have to show people that I'm worth this $20 million, and they start trying to get better, do better than they actually can. So I want you to remember that, because once you realize that you don't have to do better than your best, it will allow you to relax. When the A student gets 1,600 on their SATs, oh look, he really rose to the occasion. He didn't rise to the occasion. The student is just doing what they usually do, which is to give an excellent performance on the test that they take. Now, given that, and another one is time pressure. This is why I said the mistake earlier. None of us do better under time pressure. A lot of people like to wait to the last minute because they think that they do better. Actually, studies, many of them done at Harvard, have shown that your output might increase, but the quality actually decreases. I know that if I had another 6 months to write my book, it would have been better. That is why one of the strategies, as we will see, is always to slow yourself down. How many times have you seen the movie where the bad guy is running after somebody and the person is so scared they can't even stick the keys in their door, or they can't stick their keys into the car? That's what happens in a pressure situation, especially under time pressure. This is very important, because when people recognize, especially young people such as students, that they do not do better under time pressure, you end up giving yourself more time. You start to plan, become more effective in how you plan out what you have to get done. So that became another. Another interesting finding is that pressure bends your ethics. See, all these things is why I say pressure is a villain. Think in terms of your ethics. Many times we say in a pressure moment, in the moment of truth, our best character comes out. Tell that to Wells Fargo. They said that that entire scandal with the accounts was due, and I quote, to their pressure cooker environment. Everybody was feeling that they have to produce. This is where pressure bends your ethics. And I think that we all know, think in terms of social pressure, how many times that you have felt that you've had to do something that you didn't really do because of the social pressure that you were experiencing. This is very important, again, especially with your adolescent clients, where you have to give them some strategies, and I'm going to share them with you, that will immunize them to the social pressure or even parental expectations of others. So when you recognize what these myths are, it helps you put these feelings in perspective. Now, what are these pressure solutions? First of all, what I want you to realize, there are two types. There are ways of handling pressure in the moment so that you can perform in the moment. And there are going to be some long-term strategies that we are going to get to also. But here are some of the short-term solutions. One of the things I learned is that the mindset of a person who handles pressure well is very different than the mindset of a person who does not handle pressure well. And part of that mindset, look at this first point, is to befriend the moment. I have found that the major differentiator between people who perform to their capabilities when they have to do their best and people who don't, the biggest differentiator is how the person perceives the situation, threatening or as an opportunity. If you perceive a situation as threatening, then it's hard to approach it with confidence. Actually, you're going to approach it with a lot of anxiety. That is true today, just as it was true 10,000 years ago for early man who has to jump over a ledge for survive. And back in the day, remember, you've all heard the expression do or die. Where do you think it came from? Do you think actually an ESPN analyst made that up? There's the evolutionary function of pressure, which is to weed you out. If you didn't perform back in the day in a pressure moment, literally, you could die. If you didn't get away from that predator, you are dead. If you couldn't climb a tree when you needed to, you are dead. So that is still true today, except you're not going to actually physically die from taking a test, even though psychologically it might seem that way. So the first thing you have to do to handle pressure well is to look at how you perceive the situation. If you have an interview, is it a threatening or is it an opportunity? When I first started teaching at UCLA, I would be very nervous because I saw every presentation as threatening. If I screw up, they'll never hire me again. No, my business will go down the tube, and so on. All of you know that catastrophic line of thinking. Got to a point, though, where I started thinking of every presentation as an opportunity. When I started going on TV shows to promote my books the first time, I was nervous. After a while, when I started practicing what I preached and would befriend the moment, hey, this is a great opportunity to promote myself. This is going to be a lot of fun. The pressure went away. So one of the things you want to teach yourself and your clients is to befriend the moment by changing their perception of the situation rather than as a threat to something that is an opportunity, that something can be fun, that something can be challenging. Opportunity, fun, and challenge are the words to use. Secondly, people who do well in pressure moments always view it as multiple opportunities. I told you earlier that many times we think of a chance of a lifetime. That increases the pressure. So always think of a situation, get your clients to think this is just one of a million opportunities. This is very good to, even though, you know, when they break up in a relationship and they think they're never going to meet anybody again, it's very important to get them to realize they're going to have hundreds of other opportunities, if not thousands, of meeting other people. Instead of thinking it as the most important test, think of it as one of many tests. Get yourself and clients always to think of the situation as one of many opportunities. If I am a quarterback and I only have one receiver, well, that's a lot of pressure. But if I have 5 guys who are great receivers, that pressure is low because thinking in terms of multiple receivers rather than just one receiver, again, reduces the pressure. Third, minimize the importance of the situation. This is very counterintuitive. That I told you is that the more important you make the situation, the more pressure you feel, and ironically, the worse you will do. So it's counterintuitive, but the best thing a parent can say to their son or daughter who's taking their SATs is it's no big deal. The best thing you can tell yourself when you have an important interview for a new position is that it's no big deal. The more you can shrink the importance, the better you will do. And unfortunately, many times we inadvertently increase pressure for other people by telling them, oh, this is really important. You really have to buckle down. You really have to do well. Believe it or not, that's the worst thing that you can say. One of the most important things for a person to do well in a pressure moment is a sense of confidence. And what confidence allows you to do is to feel that you are in control of the situation. One of the ways that you can help yourself do that is to always anticipate what could go wrong. So that means that when a client is getting discharged, that you want to help him or her anticipate all the things that could happen that could create distress for them. Because if you help them anticipate those, you can work out plans. Okay, how are we going to deal with this situation? Let's say that somebody is having a eating issue and they keep gaining weight. Well, you've been doing some counseling with them, and now they're going out into a social environment. Gee, what's going to happen if a friend says, let's go to Carvel and get some, or let's go get a pizza? If the person doesn't know how he or she is going to respond then, they are never going to know in the situation. The more you anticipate adversity, what could go wrong, you can start, they can still perform. Those 4 mental habits really will help you establish a mindset that allows you to do your best when it matters most. Number 5 is very interesting, affirming your self-worth. I have found that too many people value themselves. They base their self-esteem on what they do, maybe how much money they make, the success at work. With college students, especially in a place like West Los Angeles, where are you going to school? And the kid who says Harvard versus the kid who says a school that you've never heard of, that becomes a problem, because all of a sudden the person who is going to a very non-status school starts to get down on him or herself. A person who gives a presentation at work and it doesn't go well starts to think of themselves as a bad person, as a loser. So one of the things that is very important to do when you're preparing people to handle pressure is to make sure they realize, even if he or she doesn't do well in the situation, even if they screw up the interview, that they are still a person of worth. And that's important for you to remember for yourself too. I would recommend that anytime you go into a pressure moment, a situation where you feel you have to perform your best, is right before you do that, spend a minute or two just remembering that you're a pretty good person, irrespective of the outcome of the situation. That anytime my kids were taking a test in high school, I always reiterated that, regardless of how you do on the test, you are still a great kid. Now, these are all evidence-based. There are dozens of studies on each one of these factors, really very good experimental research. In the book that I wrote on the subject, there is an extensive list of references, for the academic studies. I don't want you to think that I'm just making this stuff up. Clenching your left fist. Now, why would you do that? Studies have shown that were published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology that individuals who clench their left fist, this only works if you're a righty, by the way. If you clench your left fist before a pressure moment, you will actually do better. Now, why? Because one of the reasons people do poorly when they're trying to do their best is they become very self-conscious of how they're performing. So you can count on the fact that the 10th grader who's doing their audition all of a sudden starts to think gee, mom and dad are here. What are they thinking? I hope, are they going to still love me if I don't perform well? And as that person is having those distracting thoughts, they forget what they're supposed to do. That's when people draw a blank or they stumble through a dance step that they've rehearsed over 1,000 times. When you clench your left fist, it interrupts the language area in the right side of your brain that is responsible for those ruminating thoughts. So it's a very smart strategy just to clench your left fist, especially if you are playing golf with a friend or tennis. Before you serve, clench your left fist. It clears your mind and allows you to focus on your test. What is interesting, a friend of mine sent me the study who was at Harvard, and I will now tell you that if you did a Google on clenching your left fist and pressure, you would literally see hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of references. Every popular magazine article picked that up. I want to, so that I have time to talk about some other things, skip these last four and go to the next slide. Take a look at this. Are you in a pressure cooker? And while you are looking at this, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 9 for each one of these. And what I want to tell you is that we have different pressure needs. I would say that people under 45 who are listening, their need for pressure in young clients is to perform in the moment. That's what I call a pressure performer. I have a lot of friends who are very successful lawyers. None of them feel pressure when they walk into a courtroom to give their opening argument or their closing deliberation. They've done that hundreds of times. They're excellent at what they do. They do not feel pressure. Their pressure is along the lines of, how much longer do I have to pay for my son's college? How much longer do I have to pay for my daughter's apartment? These are people that I call pressure reducers. I am much more of a pressure reducer than a pressure performer. I look for ways to reduce the daily feelings of pressure. I am not worried when I give, whether it's a webinar or whether I have to give a presentation. I don't feel pressure in those situations. And that is not to imply that, oh, this is a great webinar, I give a great presentation all the time. I simply look at it as, I'm not feeling any pressure because I love doing this and I see it as an opportunity to share some information. But when people rate themselves high on these factors, that is a terrible way to live. That is what I like to call pressure anxiety, which is very different than performance anxiety. Performance anxiety is when you get anxious about doing a particular task, like a speech, performing in front of others. Pressure anxiety is the constant feeling 24/7 that you have to produce. There is no specific behavior. It is just a feeling that you have to produce every single day. And the anxiety part is, can I continue to do this? I have worked a lot with the financial industry. Every financial advisor experiences pressure anxiety. They wake up every single morning, I have to produce, and can I? Can I generate those numbers? And that, I have found, is a terrible way to live. Now, some of the strategies that can help you reduce those daily feelings of pressure is, the first is what I call self-excellence. We have two different types of mindsets. Some of us have a very competitive mindset. We always try to be the best. This is a ranking mindset. You're always comparing yourself to other people. This is more than keeping up with the Joneses. This is beating the Joneses. As I said, I live in Connecticut. When I used to live in West LA, I found, quite frankly, most of the people that I came in contact with had a ranking mindset. They were always comparing themselves to other people. They always had to make more money, be more successful, and then they put this onto their kids as well. The way to get out of that is just to focus on yourself. First of all, remember, to have a ranking mindset and be competitive, the competitive instinct is often called the survival instinct. What was the first competition that man had? I guarantee it wasn't like throwing a rock or climbing a tree faster. It was Mortal Kombat. There's one piece of meat, and there's only enough for one of us. We're going to fight to the death. There's the do or die moment. So back then, you had to have a ranking mindset. You had to be better than the other person to survive. I have met a lot of competitive people, and I will tell you that they are very successful. They are so successful that they can afford to go to their therapist 3 times a week. That's how successful they are. They are always on a treadmill. Competition does not bring out the best in you. It actually brings out the worst in you. So the way that you can break that is just focus on doing your best. I remember my father used to tell me, don't worry about the other guy. You can't control the other person. Many clients who have mental health disorders, I'm telling you, are very high on the competitive instinct, the competitive mindset, and that's why they're always feeling anxious. There's always going to be somebody prettier, there's always going to be somebody smarter, and there's always going to be somebody richer. I did a retreat for a law firm in Newport Beach. Everybody was making a lot of money, but their mindset was wrong. They were all competitive, and in LA, as you know, if you're a lawyer, no matter how much money you make, there's always going to be another 1,000 attorneys who are making twice as much. So focus on yourself to reduce daily pressure rather than comparing yourself to the other person. 2, many people experience pressure because they try to live up to the expectations of other people. I did a lot of marriage counseling. I saw this all the time. One guy would say he was always trying to live up to his wife's expectations, and no matter how hard he tried, it was never good enough, and she still left him. So what's that all about? How many of you remember the movie Dead Poets Society, the great Robin Williams film? The kid has to live up to his parents' expectation to become a doctor. When he really wants to become an actor, he ends up committing suicide. That happens frequently. The way to get out of that, reduce daily pressure, is to navigate your life from your own personal values. Again, when I lived in LA, how crazy was this? I had somebody come over to my house every Saturday and wash my car. When I moved to Connecticut, the first year I washed my car 3 times with my son. I didn't care what other people thought about the car that I was driving. So it's very important, this is really important with your clients, to get them cued in to running their life with their personal values rather than always operating under the expectations of other people, because you can never satisfy the other person. There will always be more expectations, and even if you meet those expectations, you can't force them to feel a certain way about you. The problem is, especially with young people, is many of them have no idea what their personal values are. So you need to spend some time helping them reflect on that and to identify what they are. 3 is focus on your interests, not the incentives. Now, we live in an incentive society. One of the things that I've noticed is that people many times will confuse a want with a need. Ask yourself, what is the difference between a want and a need? One female executive said, a need is clothes, a want is a Chanel label. Now that's a big difference, because many times we say, I need this. You don't need it. You want it. Again, living in LA, believe me, I have many fond memories. My closest friends are still in LA, but in West Los Angeles, there is a culture. So instead of people saying that they need a car, they end up saying, I need a Mercedes. And all of a sudden, now they go out and get a Mercedes. They really can't afford the monthly payments. And ironically, they end up putting more pressure on them. Start to pay attention and get your clients to differentiate between what their wants are and what their needs are. When you focus on what your needs are rather than your wants, you end up feeling less pressure. Because remember what need does, it creates an internal feeling that you have to have it. There's a lot of theories around need reduction. That's the need reduction theory, and a lot of psychological tests that many of you have heard of that are based on that our needs drive our behavior. So don't confuse with something that you want with a need. When my daughter was young and she used to say, I need this, I would say, well, what would happen if you don't get it? Are you going to die? No. So you don't really need it. It's something that you want. And also focus on your own interests. You know, my nephews told me that the only time they ever listened to me, they thought the best advice I ever gave them was to figure out what your interests are, and then you can figure out how to make money on it. When you go in terms of just your own interest, a lot of pressure is gone, that daily feeling of you have to produce. Because if you focus on what your interests are, you end up doing what you like doing, and that is very, very important. And finally, gratitude is a way of reducing daily feelings of pressure. I will tell you that when I'm feeling down or feeling really stressed, I sit on my couch and I express gratitude for the things I have. I think I have two great kids. They both live, I live in Connecticut, they both live in the city. I have great relationships with them. They're doing well at work, no problems in something. I have wonderful friends that I still speak to 3 or 4 times a week. My friends in California. I had a best-selling book out last year. I have a new online class. I have all these things, and I start feeling pretty good and less pressure. And I will tell you, 10 years ago, if somebody told me to express gratitude, I would have thought it was hokey. The reality is, maybe it's because I'm older in my life now, and there's a lot of research that shows how important that is. These are all microcosms for helping you establish what I like to call your coat of armor. And what your coat of armor means is confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. You know what I asked myself? What are the attributes that have evolved? Remember, nobody invented confidence. Nobody invented optimism. Nobody invented tenacity or enthusiasm. These are attributes that evolve because they help us deal with life's adversity. If these are long-term strategies. People who are confident, optimistic, tenacious, and enthusiastic obviously do better in pressure moments. And if we go back to these pressure solutions are microcosms of confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm. These are things that you can do that bring those other factors to life. You know, I have 10 here. You know, number 9 is really important, again, for your clients. The night before they have a big meeting or a test, an interview, whatever it is. If studies have shown that if you write down what your anxieties are the night before, you end up doing better in the pressure moment. Why? Because you've gotten them out of your system. It's like if you have a personal problem and you talk all day to 10 different friends about it, and by the time you get to the 11th friend, you know what? I'm sick of talking about this. You've gotten it out of your system. So that is very important. So the idea of the pressure solutions is they are microcosms of creating confidence, optimism, tenacity, and enthusiasm within yourself. I know I've been speaking a lot, and I'm wondering now if we do have any questions.
All right. Thank you, doctor. Thank you very much for presenting. Really nice presentation and very well presented. I'm sure it will going to help everyone handling pressure in day-to-day life. Okay, now moving towards our question answer round. So this is for all the attendees. Please use the chat box to send your questions if you have any question to ask to our speaker today. So we got a question from Adriana. What is a holistic word cue?
Okay, good question. A holistic word cue is, let's say that you're going into a pressure moment. Maybe it's an interview, maybe it's a difficult conversation. So that you don't have now you're going to have thoughts, but the idea is to minimize those distracting thoughts. And one of the ways you do that is to come up with one word that you would say to yourself that would tell you how do you want to act in that pressure moment. Like for me, for example, when I give a presentation, my holistic word cue, I just say is fun. Because what that cues me is to have fun. My thinking is if I'm having fun, everybody else will have fun, and it will come across in an effective way. Somebody else might use the word relaxed. So the idea is you can think, but instead of giving yourself a whole bunch of instructions, breathe slower, sit back in the chair, just give yourself one word or an image. Girls, for example, who never played basketball were taught how to shoot foul shots, free shots, by creating the image, you're putting the cookie in the cookie jar. Now, those who thought of putting the cookie in the cookie jar did a lot better than the students who were taught dribble the ball 3 times, bend your knees, and then roll the ball out of your hand. Those are too many instructions. So again, the idea of a holistic word cue is to give yourself one word that tells yourself how to relax. When my son, for example, he's in the recruiting business, I said, Danny, give me one word when you meet a client of how you want to come across. And he said, professional. Okay. So you keep professional in mind, and that will help you, guide you into doing all the behaviors that communicate professionalism.
All right, thank you. Moving to the next question. Emily want to ask, can you go back to the pressure solution slide?
One of the ones that's very important for your clients that is not up there, but again is in the book in the class, is share your pressure feelings. Too many people, when they're under pressure, try to keep those feelings to themselves. This is especially true with adult men and teenage boys. So it's very important as a pressure solution to share your pressure feelings. Everybody is feeling pressure at work. One of the things I would recommend is to have a session, like a 5-minute meeting, where the staff just gets together and they share the pressure feelings that they are experiencing. It might sound hokey, but it will actually be very effective for everybody.
All right, thank you so much. And moving to the next question, Adriana again want to thank you, and she's asking like, can you speak about practicing self-consciousness?
Yes. One of the reasons that people do poorly in a pressure moment is they become very self-conscious. So one of so you have to practice being self-conscious. Now I assume that you have a phone that has a camera on it. So the idea here is to, if you're practicing a presentation, video yourself doing it. Practice it in front of your friends. In other words, if you video yourself, you get over the feeling of being self-conscious. Anytime I gave a presentation that was videoed, I would always ask the person, okay, I want a copy of the video. And I would watch it. And that would get me over a lot of self-consciousness. I was watching myself on camera, and I got used to it. This is why when I would go on a TV show, I found that I did better when I forgot about the audience and I just became in an interview with the person who was talking to me. It became more natural. So the idea here, take a lot of selfies. That becomes another strategy. Just do it instead of posing. See, most people pose. I have to look good. I'm saying just start clicking that camera. And the more you get yourself on camera, the more you get used to people observing you, and then you can start to do better. Because if you are self-conscious, you are behind the 8 ball anytime you have to perform, especially in front of others. So that's what that means. Practice observing yourself.
All right. Thank you. Moving to the next question. Roger wants to ask how to control the pressure when looking for a job in a period when money becomes a real issue, before interview or during the interview.
Okay, great question. The first thing is that you have to forget about the money, because there's nothing, the only way you can deal with the money issue is to get a new job. So the money will actually increase your anxiety. So you have to stop yourself and just focus on the task, focus on your mission, which is actually another pressure solution. What is your mission? To get a job. How do you get a job? Well, by having many, many interviews. And in those interviews, how do you get a job? By being your best, presenting yourself. So I would say that what you need to do is just focus on your mission, which simply is getting a job. Remember, the interview, and also to define the interview, a good interview, as a success, so that you don't feel down. Well, my son was looking at it for a job. I said, how'd it go? He said, well, I didn't get it. I said, no, how'd the interview go? He said, oh, the interview went well. I said, well, that's a success. Because when you're looking for a job, it only becomes a matter of time. It's a numbers game. If you have enough interviews, eventually you will find a job. You do not want to distract yourself with anxiety feelings of, well, what if I don't get a job? And how am I going to pay this? And how am I going to pay that? You'll deal with that when you have to. We know that's the reality, but thinking about it is not going to help you. What will help you is by just setting up as many interviews as you can. And every time you have an interview, right before that interview, do some of these other things. Remember, this is one of many interviews. Think in multiple opportunities. Befriend the moment. See the interview as an opportunity to show your stuff, to win over the person, that it will be fun. Again, anticipate all the things, all the questions the interviewer could ask, so you become more confident, feel like you are in control of the situation. So those would be some strategies. But the main one is stay focused on your mission to get a job. Your mission is not to make money. Your mission is to get a job. If you get a job, you will be making money. If you keep thinking about, I need to get a job because of the money and so on, it's going to make you very, very anxious, and that will work against you.
All right. Thank you, Doctor. So keeping the time frame in mind, we have to end this session right here. Okay. So thank you very much, attendees, for your participation and joining
Let
us
me just
today.
say one thing.
Sorry.
And I know we covered a lot. By the way, because I'm doing this for Sovereign, anybody who would like to take the Pressure Online class, you'll get a 15% discount, but you have to send me an email, and then I could send you a special coupon for it. And once you have into the class, it's lifetime access, and it has a lot of downloads. But here's what I want you to remember, even if you don't take the class, even if you don't read the book, the main thing that I want you to remember is to perceive the pressure situations that you go into as an opportunity, as a challenge, as a situation that you can have fun. And if you can remember that, and do some of the other strategies that we've discussed, then that is a guaranteed way that I can say to you, may the pressure not be with you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Okay. Thank you so much, attendees, for your participation and joining us for this webinar. If you have any further questions, please feel free to send your questions at webinar@solvehealth.com, or if you have any questions related to CE certificate, please send in your questions at s.sharma1@solvehealth.com. Once you leave today's webinar, you will receive a thank you for attending email within 24 to 48 hours with all the information pertaining to this webinar, and it will also include the information how you can earn your CE certificate. So now I'll guide you how you can download your CE certificate, because we got lots of queries from the audience is they are facing problems downloading their CE certificate. So here's a solution for that. You just need to go at solvinstitute.com website. It's www.solvinstitute.com. There you need to register yourselves, enter your details and register yourself, and after registering you can log in there. You will be landed on a page where you can see lots of presentations, webinars. So you need to click the presentation you want to watch. After clicking that presentation, you will land on a page where the information related to that webinar or that event will be there. You just need to click on the continue to watch video button, and then after watching the video you can again click the continue button. It will take you to the feedback questions page, and there you need to fill up that feedback form and the CE questions there, and then you can download your CE certificate from there. All right, so thank you again for your participation. We hope you found this information valuable. Have a great rest of your week, and we'll be looking forward to bring more interesting webinars each month, so keep joining us. Thank you so much for attending this webinar, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye-bye.